So you've gotten a bit of a flavor for positive and negative emotions, how they differ. I mean, one of the key ways that they differ is that positive emotions are so much more subtle than negative emotions. I mean, negative emotions kind of scream at you, and positive emotions are just a little whisper sometimes. And that asymmetry between the positive and the negative is something that is definitely sort of part of life, and it's a key part of understanding positive psychology. Is negativity bias can kind of blind us to the opportunities to experience positive emotions. So maybe just take a moment and think of an example of when negativity bias creeps into your daily life. Anyone have an example of that?
Yeah, well, what comes to mind for me is there have been times where I've, say, given a talk or had an interview or something, and there will be maybe one thing that I said that was wrong or just not exactly how I wanted to say it. And even if it was a great talk, afterwards that'll kind of be replaying like, oh, I could have said it this way and that would have been more powerful, or whatever it is. But it's amazing how much it can stick with you, something small like that.
Right, yeah. This is the way the human brain is designed. Now that's not necessarily a personality difference. This is kind of a human universal, is that the negative stuff pops out and screams. So, there are all kinds of ways where we can see where that would have been adaptive. Does anybody have thoughts on?
Well, I'm thinking of the political campaign, political season. You just get a hold of one thing, and then the commercials and the negative ads, and it just spirals and spirals, and we end up so polarized, and people hold on to the negative versus even taking the time to get to know the candidate or the platform.
Right.
All you need is one spark, and then it just goes off.
Well, it's because, that one spark will grab everybody's attention. So this is why the news is, if it bleeds, it leads. That's because the job of those in the media is to grab attention. And so that's the quickest, cheapest, surefire way to get that attention. So, it's kind of like a cheap shot in some ways, but it's just the way the brain is designed, our whole, what we inherited from our, early human ancestors. And, you can see pretty readily that, okay, it's good for us to be attuned to danger, because those of our ancestors who were attuned to danger, became our ancestors instead of just being a broken branch on the family tree. Some people have argued that the negativity bias is, like, in the current circumstance, a design flaw. I don't think it is, because if we're feeling great and wonderful, so great and wonderful that we don't notice that a bus is about to hit us, that wouldn't be good. So we still need this negativity bias today, but it does kind of get in the way, and our brains are just supercharged, ready to pick apart any mistakes or come across anything negative. So we just need to work with that, kind of counteract that. I think one way to counteract that is to get more familiar with the range of positive emotions. And so one thing I'd like to do is to kind of go through 10 different kinds of positive emotions really quickly, and for each one talk about the kind of circumstance that creates it, the kind of appraisal or how we interpret that circumstance that triggers it, what it makes us want to do right then, and then kind of long term, what are the outcomes that go with it? And just to give you a flavor of, positive emotions isn't just all happy. There's so many different kinds of positive emotions, and in fact, I've written in some places like, oh, I'd like to ban the word happy, just because it's used so often. It's not very specific. Certainly I don't ban the word happy, but as a scientist, it becomes a little less useful sometimes, so I try to get a little more specific. The emotion that's probably closest to happy would be joy. The circumstances that elicit joy are, something's going really well for you, maybe better than expected, situation, feel safe. And when people feel joyful, the tendency that comes out in terms of a change in action urges, sort of the jargon phrase we use, is people get playful. You know, they kind of want to mix it up with others, kind of, you know, be a little off the wall. You know, that happy feeling, you know, comes with that tendency to play. And one thing that's interesting about when people get playful, they're actually learning. They don't know they're learning, but you're kind of, you know, learning new connections with others, or, you know, even in rough and tumble play, people are learning physical skills or the best hideouts, or, you know, or different things like that. So anyway, the one that's probably closest to happy is joy, and that's kind of an upbeat positive emotions. Within positive emotions, there's also a lot of quieter ones. Gratitude would be, you know, perhaps one of the quieter positive emotions, much more social. The thing that makes gratitude stand apart from joy is that when you take that good experience, something good just happened to you, and you think, oh, someone went out of their way to make that good thing happen. When that interpretation is added on to joy, then it becomes gratitude. It's like, oh, you did this, you didn't have to do that. I feel, you know, I cherish our friendship, you know, and that sort of thing. That way in which seeing that someone else did something kind is the origin of the good thing. And, you know, when people feel grateful, they kind of want to creatively or find a way to give back, you know, or pay it forward to somebody else, or, you know, because it just inspires you to try to be kind when you recognize kindness. And so that's sort of a kind of a long-term stream of gratitude. Another of the quieter positive emotions would be serenity. You know, just feeling like your current circumstances are so right that you just want to have more of this in your life. And, you know, I think in those moments, people, you know, some emotion theorists had said, you know, oh, when people feel serene or content, they just don't want to do anything. I think what's happening is much more mental in that stage, where people are kind of savoring and integrating, saying, I would like to have more of this in my life, please. You know, so even though there may not be a lot of action, like, you know, that playful, you know, running around business, there's still a lot going on cognitively. And that helps people know what they prioritize. There's another positive emotion that a lot of people don't think of as a positive emotion, is interest. And I think sometimes people think emotions are rare and interest is so common that that maybe it's not an emotion, but I really think it is. It's you know, the circumstances are safe, but there's some amount of novelty, something that you haven't mastered yet that kind of draws you in, some kind of mystery kind of pulls you in. And yet, overall, you know, it's a reasonably safe situation. You know, it doesn't become anxiety producing. When people feel that, they're kind of pulled in to explore and learn something new along the way. One of my favorite positive emotions, because it actually occurs in situations where the circumstances are not positive at all, is hope. You know, it's like the next possible emotion might be despair. So, you know, not all positive emotions happen in circumstances that are good. You know, so with hope, it's kind of fearing the worst, but yearning for better. And that kind of situation, fearing the worst, yearning for better, kind of pulls out people's inventiveness and increases their resilience to hard times. Pride is, you know, you mentioned this earlier, you know, in terms of feeling proud of your family members. You know, whenever the circumstance that causes pride is a socially valued achievement. You know, something, not just you did something good, but you did something good that in our culture is valued, and that kind of makes people kind of come together and feel proud, both either of themselves for doing something that's valued by others, or proud of another person for showing those values. And sometimes people say the action tendency of pride is to just, boast, kind of just, stand tall. But actually, I think there's a lot more going on mentally with that, and is that people start dreaming big and dreaming of the next thing. Well, if I could do that, then I could do this other thing. So it kind of unlocks this achievement motivation. You can probably see this in school settings a lot, or in sports settings too. So just to get through the rest of these positive emotions, another one is amusement, and the part of amusement that I think is really amusing to me is that scientists have just described what makes amusement is non-serious social incongruity, which kind of takes all the fun out of it, doesn't it? But basically it's like some mishap, but it's non-serious. And so it's not like you go and rush to somebody's aid, but when you just kind of make some kind of mishap, and that leads to amusement, shared laughter, and creates connection. Inspiration, another positive emotion. You have talked about using positivity to inspire. I think that the circumstance that causes inspiration is seeing human excellence on display. And or a great talent that's worthy of your admiration. And that's a matter of interpretation. I mean, some people see people do good things and think, oh, ho-hum, and others really frame it as, oh, that's an exemplar. I'd like to be more like them. And that sort of aspiring to one's own excellence in seeing another person's excellence is really what's going on with inspiration. There's another more cognitive positive emotion, awe. It's also kind of a quiet one. It's sort of like feeling like you're in the presence of greatness on a large scale. So it's kind of like inspiration might be a little more personal. Awe sometimes feels like I, as a person feeling awe, feel small relative to the grandness of what's happening here, and it's an emotion that's really shaped around helping us accommodate something new. And it helps us see ourselves as part of a larger whole, kind of knits us to something larger. Now, I've mentioned all of these positive emotions in the order of their frequency in people's daily experience, according to the research that we've done in our lab. I mean, it's not definitive, but at least people tend to feel joy and gratitude the most. The one exception that I made is I saved the best for last, love, which is actually one of the most positive or most frequent positive emotions people experience. And I think of that as kind of an all of the above positive emotion. It's it's feeling joy with others. It's feeling serene with others. And whenever a positive emotion is kind of co-experienced by two or more people, that could equally be redescribed as love. Now we'll talk a lot more about that later in the course. But one of the things I want to mention is that the negativity bias is always present. Scientists call that sort of bad is stronger than good. There's another equally important asymmetry between positive and negative, and that is, it goes under the heading of positivity offset. And that is that positive experiences are actually more frequent than negative. So that's what I think gives us a sense of hope about all of this, is that there's actual scientific evidence to show that the distribution of good and bad events in people's lives, for the most part, favors the good. There are many more good things going on. Now, whether we actually let those positive events become positive emotions, that's kind of a matter of choice and training in a way. But the most often people feel a mild positive emotion. If you kind of just want to take the average emotion that people feel across their day, unless you're depressed or anxious or going through a particularly hard time. But average experience tends to be on this positivity offset. So, I mean, I'm just wondering if you guys have any experiences or connections that would kind of capture either one of these asymmetries, positivity offset, or, you know.
Is there such thing as neutral? And
Is there?
it seems like the positive ones that we maybe don't recognize might be perceived as just neutral.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
they don't recognize it because it's just neutral, or they feel it's neutral?
Yeah, you know, I think that's a great question because, you know, just kind of like a fish doesn't see water. You know, if we feel interested a lot of the time, we might not see that as a positive emotion. Or if we feel comfortable and kind of, you know, reasonably happy with the situation, we kind of see it as nothing. When I think, you know, we can take that those subtle experiences and realize, oh yeah, that's this positive stuff. That's kind of start this upward spiral. You know, this interest could get me, you know, going a lot further. So, thanks.
I find it interesting that the positive events happen more frequently than negative events, and I think one of the things from my research that I'm interested in exploring is maybe that's what we can do to get people to experience their relationships more fully, or positive emotions more fully, is really just to take notice of the positive events that are already there. And it's not really, it might not be about changing anything, but just noticing and appreciating things that are there.
Exactly.
Reminds me of a new exercise that's going around the world. I just started participating where you get a jar, or I grabbed a flower vase, and every day you take a piece of paper and you jot down the good things that happened to you. And then a year from now you read them. So it's the same concept. Now you're being intentional and looking at those positive activities for the day.
Yeah, great example.
We do it with kids in school too, solution-focused counseling. You look for these exceptions to the negative stuff. So actually the positive stuff for them to attend to, which I haven't thought about, because if I'm failing a class, I've never done well. But there's always some time that they have done better than that. And so if they focus on those, it really helps them get active and some agency into doing something about it.
Yeah, great examples, you guys. This is wonderful. Thanks.